Hey there, students. Time for a little bit of APUSH live Q&A. Now, this is the first of hopefully several Hangouts I'll be doing this week. Some announced, some unannounced. All right, so let's go ahead. Okay, and it's still not letting me share my screen. Okay, so what I'm going to say is we've got a few things that are going on this week. For some reason, it's not going to let me share my screen. Well, actually, it looks like it is letting me share the screen now. Okay, well, thank you for letting me share my screen. Excellent. All right, so as far as this goes, tomorrow night, Monday, which may be tonight by the time you're watching this, if you're watching the archive on Monday, I'm doing a premium hangout, a multiple choice strategy session. I'm going to put a card once this is over, but there is a link in the description. Now, this is premium, which means that I'm putting stuff out there that is just really, I mean, this is a program. You're going to be able to interact with me. It's not like a Twitter thing. It's going to be a limited number of people. There are only so many spots that are available because of the platform I'm going to be using. So this is really going to be more of a training than a hangout. This isn't just me answering questions. This is going to be me having a program that I've put together and you're going to be able to interact with me during this. It's not just going to be a Q&A thing. This is going to be an organized session where I'm going to be focusing on multiple choice strategy. This is limited to only 50 people, and I think that I've got 20 tickets left, and this is still almost a day away. So you want to make sure to get those while they're still available, and I think this is really going to help you on the multiple choice if you're wondering how to tackle these stimulus-based multiple choice questions, and we'll be going over questions and going over strategies. Now, then on Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, Hip Hughes and I will be broadcasting the last review. It's going to be Star Wars Day, May 4th. And so we want to make sure we kind of pay homage to that. I've got a Kylo Ren mask. I'm really looking forward to that. And so that's going to be happening Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Now, the multiple choice strategy session is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern because I want to accommodate people who are on the West Coast, and you can't really get here late for that because it's going to be kind of like a class that I'm teaching rather than a hangout when everybody can just drop in and come and go as they please. So the thing on Monday evening is a class. Now, teachers, if you want to get into that, you should be able to show this to your students after it's over. Or if you're a student, you want to share it with your friends after it's over, it should work. So that's going to be on May 4th. Now, I'm also going to have some things that are I may be, broadcasting just, on a whim or something like that. So if you go to tomritchie.net /APUSH, okay, tomritchie.net /APUSH, there is a place to sign up for my APUSH students email list, okay? So you can sign up for my email list, make sure you get updates. I didn't have time to get an email out before this, but usually if I do short notice hangouts, I send a notification to people on my email list. Now, of course, also, if you haven't seen commercials yet for the Romulus APUSH review app, make sure to get a hold of that. Available at the App Store and Google Play. Now, I'm going to go ahead and head to Twitter and see what people are asking me to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what some questions are. I'm going to do quick Q&A for about half an hour. This is going to be a short one. Some of them are longer than others, but let's see a little Q&A. My Twitter is @TomRitchie. All right, so as far as that goes, let me make sure everybody knows that we're live. Okay, so we are, APUSH live review. Okay, so review, let's say. Sorry, I just got a question on Twitter. Somebody thought maybe this was canceled. Okay, so I want to make sure people know that that is not the case. All right, so we've got that going on. All right, so let's see what's happening here. All right, so multiple choice session tomorrow. Glad Katie Carroll's coming over there to that multiple choice session. Okay, thank you, Miss Whipple, for highly recommending the last review. All right, so as far as that goes, let's see. That's funny. Okay, people are watching now. Biggest concepts to understand from period 9. Now, the thing is, a lot of people are asking about period 9. Like, anyway, the thing is, there are sometimes, I guess, that even though I don't really want to talk about period 9, then, because it's really kind of lame. It's like recent stuff. It's like I was alive for this stuff. Like period 9 is basically like the main event in 1980 is like Tom Ritchie is born. And then that's basically the period. So it's like it's my own lifetime. It's like how much more lame can you get than that? But you know what? Since people are asking me about period 9 and Miss Banowitz said something about that, and I just like basically growled at her on Twitter, which she doesn't deserve it because Miss Banowitz is awesome. Stag High School, if you're watching, shout out. And so, as far as that is concerned, let me go ahead and go in here and just kind of take a look at this and see what is like this period 9 that we're talking about and what is it that they want us to know. And I usually don't do it like this. I usually just kind of go off the cuff. But here's a little secret: I never get to period 9. And so I never really teach this stuff, but I can kind of go over the main stuff. Okay, so let me see where I'm going. Let's see. Okay, shortest questions. Sorry, looking for something here. All right, so yeah, like I said, this is the sort of thing that I typically don't do, but I think that people seem to want it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. Take a look at that, and we're going to do that. Okay, so first of all, okay, the conservative movement. The thing about this, the conservative movement. Now, what you need to understand is the conservative movement. The really like the big moment of triumph for the conservative movement is the election of Ronald Reagan, okay, in 1980. So, in order to do this, right, we've got to go back a little bit because we think about like a turning point. If we think about like periodization, it's like, okay, to what extent was Ronald Reagan's election in 1980 a turning point in American politics? Now, we could say, now when we think about conservatism, now that is modern American conservatism, which of course that seems to be evolving a bit with the election of President Trump, yet all things evolve. But as far as what is it the conservatives want, when you think about the Reagan coalition, you're looking at low taxes, a lot of defense spending, anti-communism, more defense spending, but less spending on social services. Now, this is where you've got to, in order for additional context, what you've got to do is you've got to look at what were things like before. So we go all the way back to like Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society. And the Great Society was basically like, okay, we're going to have a war on poverty. And so, at the same time, we're going to have a war in Vietnam and we're going to have a war on poverty. That was not such a good idea. And thank y'all. It looks like the number of people in here is growing. Thank y'all for telling your friends to be here. And so the war on poverty, we're going to have Medicare, Medicaid, we're going to have social welfare, like just more than we've had, not the New Deal, but like the New Deal on crack or whatever. And so just all kinds of stuff that we're going to do. And of course, you had a lot of civil rights legislation that was passed in the 1960s. And of course, that's really part of the conservative movement with Reagan is really it's another states' rights kind of thing too, that power should go back to the states. Now, of course, there are some things like if you look at the welfare reform bill that was signed by President Clinton in 1996, that was a very conservative piece of legislation. And that is a defining feature of Bill Clinton's presidency is, and you might have heard if you were following the 2016 election that, there are a lot of Democrats on the more progressive side that tend to reject, they tend to be embittered by this, kind of center left version, center left kind of Clinton version of being a Democrat, and Clinton, after he got, I lived through this, Clinton, after his party got demolished in 1994 with the Republican contract with America, Newt Gingrich and all of that kind of stuff, that you had basically Bill Clinton decided, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And so the Republican Congress, while they had some things, you had the Clinton impeachment and all that kind of stuff, and they went on government shutdowns and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's like basically Bill Clinton, a Democratic president, is the president who signed a welfare reform bill. And what this did is this put restrictions, like there was a feeling, especially among conservatives, that social welfare in the United States was being abused by people. And so the federal government passed things to try to curb those abuses, to put limits on, the amount of time that somebody can be on welfare without a job. Also, this is sending stuff back to the states. Okay, so what happens is, in like things that the federal government was administering directly, like what we're going to do is we're going to get that money and we're going to give it to the states in forms of, when you get an AP government, if you're not taking that right now, along with US history, is called a block grant. Now, a block grant is when the, block grant is when the, what do you call it? Yeah, the federal government gives. I've been traveling all weekend, just got back from Miami from an AP Euro review, so sorry if I'm a little loopy. But a block grant is when the federal government gives money to the states, and it's like, okay, the money has to serve this general purpose, and then you can do whatever you want with it, though, as long as it's for some type of welfare. So the states can have some flexibility in how they spend it, and that is something that that I think is is important, because that is part of this whole like conservative movement that you see that. Let me see. I'm actually working on something that I'm trying to get here. Let's see. So I've got. I'm going to post something on Twitter because I'm thinking about it. I've got like a period 8 outline that goes into some of this stuff. Okay, and I go into this. Now I've got this on my APUSH review page. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to post a link to this period. Yeah, so basically, I mean, Bill Clinton, cooperated with Republicans to pass welfare reform in the mid-90s. Okay, so I'm going to go over to Twitter at Tom Ritchie, and I'm going to post my period 8 notes and outline. Okay, so for the so-called period 8, okay, so APUSH period 8 notes and outline. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'll bring attention to, if you go to my website, now I mentioned here, y'all want to be on my email list, but there's also some other stuff. Like when I'm not broadcasting live, I've put together something for you here. That what I've put together is, let's see, okay, so what I've put together here, if you go to courses, so the AP US History, now that's the APUSH page, tomritchie.net/APUSH, but if you go to courses, AP US History, you see this tab that says APUSH Review, or you can go to, you can find, but basically APUSH Review, you can go subscribe to my email list or whatever, and this has a lot of different stuff on it. It's got stuff about how to take the test, okay, then it's got stuff about now Albert.io is another great website. I don't own Albert.io, but it is a great website. Great people run it. Very helpful if you want like stimulus-based questions and stuff like that. All right, so as far as that goes, I've got all kinds of resources and videos and all of that. And so this period 8 notes outline is here on this page. And so lots of great stuff. I've got some stuff by other people, Kip Hughes, Daniel Joes. I've got my friend Mr. Bett's class. If you need a little study break or something like that, not a bad idea to watch a little Mr. Bett's class. Okay, I can't get Albert.io to open up, but that's okay. Great website, and if you email them, you mention my name, you should be able to get $5 off of subscription. All right, so as far as that goes, I've shared a few things with y'all. So the conservative movement is a big definition there. And so Reagan, now the thing is that Reagan increased military spending. He got to do that. And this is, of course, part of his rollback policy. Like Reagan takes the Cold War, which goes back ever since Harry Truman, there was the emphasis on the policy of containment. We won't allow communism to spread. And so Ronald Reagan says, you know what, I want to, and the way I remember this all starts with R, Reagan rollback. And so what he said is kind of like Walmart's rolling back prices or whatever, but Reagan wants to roll back communism. And so we don't want to just contain it anymore. We want to go to like some places where communism is, and we want to run them off. And one thing that happened, during Reagan's term is you had these leftist governments in Latin America that Reagan was fighting proxy wars. Now, of course, the Iran-Contra scandal was when the Reagan administration was illegally selling arms to Iran, and then they were using the money to, to fight leftists in Latin America. And so that's what you're looking at. That's what you're looking at there. And so with that, as far as that is concerned, that's that. Now, Let me see what else besides the conservative movement. Now, the thing is, though, he wasn't as successful in cutting domestic spending, which that's another thing about the conservative movement. Now, it's Bill Clinton, ironically, who balanced the budget with Republicans in Congress, but Reagan had, Democrats in Congress, and of course, maybe Republicans in his own party that did not support his plans to fundamentally cut several federal programs. For example, Reagan, when he ran, he said he was going to even eliminate the Federal Department of Education, which had just been established by Jimmy Carter, but never got around to doing that. So you really didn't see a massive reduction of government during Reagan's time. A lot of that was more rhetoric. It was kind of like, if you want to use synthesis, Jefferson's election in 1800. Sure, it changed some things, and Jefferson made some minor changes to the government, but it wasn't as big of a change as people anticipated. And of course, I think you see the same thing right now. I mean, synthesis is about creating, going into a historical principle that kind of you can see over and over again. So whether you look at 1980, whether you look at 1800, or whether you look at 2016, the country wasn't changed as much as people expected, okay, or as the candidates even promised during their campaigns. And so as far as that kind of stuff, you got that, but there were very high deficits in the 1980s. All right, now also worldwide economic communities. One thing to note is after 1980, we're starting to see a decline in American manufacturing. And specifically in the early 90s, you see Bill Clinton signed NAFTA, which of course, if you follow the news today, and you should know what's going on, that there are, as far as that goes with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, this is creating basically a free trade zone between the U.S. and Canada. As far as that, the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. And so, you hear President Trump today talking about, not physically today, but, recently, talking about, should NAFTA be amended? Should the United States get out of it? Because it has had the effect of accelerating the loss of manufacturing jobs in the United States. And so, if any of you don't like President Trump, thanks, NAFTA. I mean, really, it's like Bill Clinton when he signed NAFTA into law. It's like, in some ways, starting the chain of events that is leading to a very rapid. There was a guy named Ross Perot in 1992 who ran for president as an independent, really rich guy from Texas, tech billionaire. And he talked about a giant sucking sound. Okay, this is when NAFTA was being talked about. He talked about a giant sucking sound of American jobs going to Mexico and to other countries. Also, the general agreement on tariffs and trade, the WTO. So basically, trade barriers since the 1990s have been, and you've got the same thing going on in the European Union. So, you could talk about that as synthesis. That's what we call horizontal synthesis. Now, I call vertical synthesis. That's when we're looking at the timeline, right? We're looking at years. And so, election 1800. Then you've got, election 1800, then the election of 1980. And then if you're looking at horizontal synthesis, it's like, okay, 1993, North American Free Trade Agreement. 1992, I believe, the Treaty of, whatever, good Lord, I've got just a total brain freeze here. But I'm thinking Maastricht. Okay, that's how the Dutch would say it. But the Maastricht Treaty, you don't even have to know that. If you note that in the European Union, the European Union was established, and trade barriers in Europe were also being broken. And so this was a time in the 1990s to have, a freer trade environment. But the trade-off there is that America has less manufacturing jobs. Now we've got, as a result, cheaper consumer goods. And so, significant technological, economic, and demographic changes. So, as far as we see here, the cultural influence, the political, economic, and cultural influence of the American South, and West continue to increase as population shifted to those areas. This is what's called the Sun Belt, ladies and gentlemen, okay? So if you imagine, historically, The population center was in the Northeast. If you go back like 100 years, okay, and before World War II, most of the population is in the Northeast. Those are the biggest states, the biggest population centers. Let me actually pull something up for you. Okay, so look here. All right, so let's take a look at the 1912 presidential election, for example. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, 1912 presidential election. And what we've got here is that you notice here, let's look at the electoral votes. 38 electoral votes for Pennsylvania, 24 for Ohio, which around the turn of the 20th century, I think 5 or 6 presidents came from Ohio, 45 electoral votes for New York, 6 votes for Florida, 13 votes for Texas. I mean, Texas over here. Okay, I know where Texas is, ladies and gentlemen. Now, somebody can tweet that if they want to. Now, 13 electoral votes for California. And so you see here that this is where the influence is in the Northeast. And then, what's his name? Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was the first president born west of the Mississippi River. That before Herbert Hoover was elected in 1928, every American president had been born east of the Mississippi. So one of the things here, which I just got back from Miami, I tell you, those people love air conditioning. Like, I mean, it's so hot outside, but then when you go into a building, it's freaking freezing. Like, it's just so cold. I mean, it's like they had in a hotel room, it's like the natural place of the thermostat was like on 65. I was like, I don't want to be 65. I'm from the South, like I'm used to it being kind of warm, like 72 degrees, please, or maybe a little more than that, 73, 74, whatever. But the thing is, like, what happens here is air conditioning. After World War II, it changes things. Now, the South is a tolerable place to live. Southern California is a tolerable place to live. South Florida is now a tolerable place to live. Of course, they're draining swamps and all of that kind of stuff. Way before, Donald Trump started talking about that. Miami is one of the largest metropolitan areas. Let me see if somebody told me that was true. I don't want it to repeat something here. Okay, so largest cities and, largest metropolitan statistical areas, United States. Okay, so when you go into that, New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Washington, Philadelphia, Miami. That Miami is 8th, okay? Miami is the 8th largest metropolitan area. Now, then Los Angeles is the 2nd largest metropolitan area. Now, check this out. New York's still the biggest, but Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston, these areas are all in the Sun Belt. Washington, now Miami, Atlanta. So when we look at the top 10, 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, at least half of these are in the Sun Belt, okay, Sun Belt. And so when we talk about the Sun Belt, we are talking about these states that are here, okay? And these are states that before World War II, you didn't see people live there. Now, of course, this map has changed. And although the United States has less manufacturing than we used to have, the South starts to take on. Remember, the South has been agricultural for most of U.S. history. But after World War II, it's the Taft-Hartley Act, okay? The Taft-Hartley Act. Which this act was something that it enabled states to get around provisions of the Wagner Act. Basically, that states can say, can say things as far as, the states can say, we don't want to participate in the Wagner Act. Like, we don't want to require, basically, we want anybody to be able to have a job without joining a union. And so corporations, like you notice, that the former Confederate States of America, all of these states are right-to-work states, which basically in these states, it's illegal for a company to make it, or for it to be mandatory to join a union. That right-to-work means that I have a right to work whether I am in a union or not. Now, lately, we've seen Wisconsin and Michigan passing some of these laws, Indiana, so Iowa, which, but the South was really on, now you notice the Northeast doesn't have right to work laws. These are the old areas where you used to have the centers of industrial labor. And so the South is like, well, you know what? We would like to attract some of these companies. And so these companies start moving into the South, like South Carolina has the BMW plant. Alabama has the Mercedes-Benz plant. This is not by accident, okay? This is not by accident. That what's going on is that there are less regulations in these states. And so companies want to go to these states, and they are, bringing these manufacturing jobs. So manufacturing jobs have, declined in the United States, but the locations of the manufacturing jobs, it's almost like the reverse of the Great Migration of African Americans. Like African Americans during and after World War I left the South to go to Chicago, to go to New York. But then what's happening is these manufacturing jobs are now going to the South. So note that in this time after World War II, we're seeing that manufacturing is really picking up in these places. Now, of course, a state like South Carolina, textile manufacturing came down here, and then now that's going to other countries. So it's not like, the South hasn't suffered from a decline in manufacturing jobs as well. Now, another thing is the manufacturing jobs we have tend to be more high-tech manufacturing jobs. And so as far as that goes, the Taft-Hartley Act, which was passed, in 1947, there were a lot of strikes after World War II, so public opinion was turning against strikers. And so, the Congress passed this over Harry Truman's veto. Truman, of course, being a Democrat, and Democrats tend to be friendly to labor unions. Now, what we've started to see is that Republicans, especially under President Trump has been very, conciliatory toward unions, which have traditionally been a Democratic constituency in the 20th century. So the Sun Belt here, we see here Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, California, and then we see basically, this is like, the Confederate States of America, like original 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the Deep South, okay? The Deep South now becomes a place where people are moving. So if we go and we look at the 1912 election, and then we change this to the 2012 election, then we see here that now the biggest state is California. Then we've got New York, but New York is tied. Actually, no, never mind. There goes Texas again. Sorry. If any of y'all are in Texas, I'm sorry. I grew up in Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana, about 20 miles from Texas. That's why I talk like you, if you're from this area. All right, so as far as that goes, we've got 55, 38, 29, okay? So now California, Texas, Florida, okay? You've got all of that stuff. Now, even if we were looking at California population density map, you see that the densest areas of population in California, now of course you got the Bay Area, but then you've got the LA and San Diego metropolitan areas that are very, very populated here in Southern California. And so as far as that goes, we see now, notice here that Ohio and Pennsylvania, they don't wield as much influence as they did. Okay, now Ohio's still got a good bit, but you look at these places, and now let's see, Wisconsin has less influence today. And so this is what's called the Rust Belt. Like when we think about, you might have heard this in reference to the 2016 election, that Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, these states, and you see that. So as far as that goes, that's what you're looking at here with the Sun Belt. So after World War II, we've got the Sun Belt, and of course this, which used to be the center of manufacturing, Standard Oil was in Cleveland, Ohio. Carnegie Steel in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So these areas known as the Rust Belt. And so as far as that goes, and a shout out to Mr. George's class, in the Rust Belt. Okay, so if you're one of Mr. George's students, Tyler George, let him know that I said hello. I think he's going to be helping us work on a Romulus World History app for next time. Now, remember, for APUS History, my app, Romulus APUS History Review, you can get it on the App Store. You can get it at Google Play. Get your hands on that. It'll help you out. Basically, it's just a simple little content app, okay? It's not anything like overly complicated. It's just getting the content in front of you as many times as possible through the easiest way possible. It's not so much for the multiple choice. It's helping you to remember things for the LEQ and the DBQ and the SAQs. So do remember that. Okay, so let me go ahead and check into another thing, okay? Now, international migration from Latin America and Asia. And so we see that, that the United States is, becoming more diverse, is becoming, more influence from Asia, more influence from Latin America. And so as far as that, cultural debates, immigration policy, diversity, gender roles, family structures. Now, another thing about the conservative movement is social conservatism, an emphasis on traditional family structures and stuff like that. Okay, an emphasis on traditional family structures and everything. So with that, you want to make sure that we've got, that you know that about the conservative movement as well. And so, today we hear people socially liberal, socially conservative. And so then new challenges to U.S. leadership force the nation to redefine foreign policy, okay? And so basically, as far as that kind of stuff, Reagan, increased defense spending and really, tried to bring the Soviets, the Soviets try to keep up and they can't. Let's see, increased U.S. military spending, okay? So we've got all that. So the end of the Cold War. And so during Clinton's time, peacekeeping stuff, that kind of thing, okay? And let's see what it wants us to get into here, okay? Post September 11th, so of course terrorism and all that. And you should have some frames of reference for the war on terror, the Middle East, all that kind of stuff. So as far as that goes, I think that I've covered like some of the, the key points of period 9, which emphasizes the conservative movement, demographic changes. Now, as far as people coming into the country from Asia and Latin America, so we see the countries becoming more culturally diverse. We see the internal migration since World War II that are going to the Sun Belt, to the west, to the south. And so we see the Northeast having less influence, the South and the West having more influence, which another thing you see, one thing that's interesting, speaking of the South and me being Southern and all that, 8 of the first 12 presidents were from the South. Then between Andrew Johnson and Woodrow Wilson, there was about a 50-year period. Now, Woodrow Wilson, does he really count as a Southern president? Because he went from the South to New Jersey, got elected governor of New Jersey, then president. So when you think about that, Lyndon Johnson became president in 1963, as far as that goes. And you have almost a 100-year period where there is one guy from the South that was elected, and he had to go through New Jersey to get to the presidency. And so when it comes down to it, you've got this drought of Southern presidents. But then Johnson, Nixon, sorry. Yeah, it's been a long weekend. Johnson, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. Now Reagan from California, so that's still Sun Belt. So Reagan, Bush 41, Bill Clinton, Bush 43, and then Obama and Trump. So basically, out of the last 10 presidents, 4 of them have been Southern. So 2/3 of the first 12 presidents were Southern. Then there were almost no Southern presidents for about 100 years. And then what we've seen recently is that nearly half of the presidents since 1963 have been from the South. And if we think about this, if you think about Reagan, then then half the presidents have been from the Sun Belt. So you can see here, it's like who's got influence? Where are presidents being elected? So at the turn of the 20th century, you had all these presidents from Ohio. And that's where the influence was, and this is changing. And so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, do remember that I'll be doing some other just like quick impromptu broadcasts like this. And so it'll be useful for you to join my email list. I mean, get a hold of my app. All right, Romulus APUSH Review. Then, you know, my email list, if I can find my website, there we go. If you go to my APUSH review page. Now, apologies to the people who are on the APUSH 8-week study plan. I started that. I didn't finish it. It happens, okay? I'm going to finish it next year. But the APUSH review page is where you want to be right now, because this has got all kinds of stuff on one page, okay? Basically all kinds of stuff that can help you study for the exam. And tomorrow night, I'm going to be doing the premium hangout Monday night. So if you want to register for that, that's available on my website. I've got something in the description, and I'll add a card. And remember, May the 4th be with you. We'll have the last review May 4th at 8 o'clock p.m. Okay, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to help this week. And I'm going to be doing some AP government stuff as well. So it's going to be a crazy week, but I'm here for you, APUSH, and make sure people know that. Let people know I'm broadcasting and how to, you know, how to find that. So I'm going to be Twitter, Instagram, email, you know, check all those things. Snapchat sometimes. This has been really short notice, but usually I'll hit up all those things. Twitter and Instagram at Tom Ritchie, Snapchat, Tom Ritchie SC. All right, so with that, I will be back, and just make sure the last review Thursday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. It's always a pleasure.